Good morning. I saw a comment from Micah mentioning that previous advice I'd given about batching pages and adding your speech bubbles first when you're planning your comic pages really helped them. So I'm gonna reiterate some things that can help you plan your comic pages better. I'm sure I've mentioned these tips before, but they're buried in all our videos, and I don't know which ones I talked about that stuff in. So here we go. New video. Let's freaking go. My first piece of advice for planning your pages better is to do your thumbnails. So thumbnails, some people call them storyboards. They're small sketches where you plan out the composition and layout of your page. These can be really quick and dirty. If you're the only artist working on them, if you have to hand them off to other artists or get approval from other creative partners, making them a bit more detailed is helpful to just help them understand what you're planning. But if it's just you, you can make them as messy and undetailed as you need, as long as you understand the layout you're going for. But I know that is hard for some people where it just doesn't compute and they need to do something a bit more detailed. It can be a really loose pencil that you then go over again with more structured pencils or sketches, and that's fine. Just don't skip this step. Always do your thumbnails. It will save you a lot of pain. The reason that thumbnails are so important is that if you have something that's even if it's just a really loose pencil, but if it's a small drawing that doesn't have a lot of detail in it, it's really easy to make corrections before you've put in a ton of work. If you sit down and you realize, oh my gosh, this page doesn't work, I need to redo it, way easier to redo a tiny little sketch than it is to redo something that you've already fully penciled or inked. So thumbnails are really, really important. They're really helpful. Use them to your advantage. Something that I do a lot with my thumbnails, so I do them all digitally, but if I have a panel that isn't working, and I usually sit down and I show Bones and we do a little feedback session where he tells me I don't think this works for my vision. But usually if there's a panel or a page that isn't working, I will take it and just lower the opacity and onion skin it and draw a new version on top, so then I can still understand what I was going for before and just rework it a little bit. And they're small drawings, so it's really easy. And the way I get feedback with Bones, I think you should too. Get some feedback on your thumbnails where they're still tiny. Again, it's helpful to talk to someone who has an understanding of what comic pages look like. So a friend who makes comics or another creative friend who you can explain things to, I think is your best bet. But getting feedback at that early stage is really, really helpful. My second piece of advice, and this is what Micah mentioned, make sure you add your speech bubbles in when you're planning out your pages. You can do this in the thumbnailing stage, that's even better, but I always recommend at least do this at the penciling stage. And make sure that you add text into those speech bubbles. Take your script and pop in those pieces of dialogue, okay? Speech bubbles are a part of your composition, they're a part of your page. A mistake, and I did this too when I was starting comics, a mistake that a lot of people that are new to comics will make is they'll draw out this whole beautiful panel and then they'll have to cram their captions and their speech bubbles in around their beautiful artwork because they don't want to cover it up or it doesn't work for the composition. So always make sure that you plan your text in your bubbles, your text. You might have a piece of text or a caption or a sound effect that doesn't go in a bubble. Make sure you plan those too, because they are part of your composition. And placing the text into those bubbles when you're planning things. And I've done a mix of sometimes I'll just write it out by hand, which does take a while, or you can just copy paste using your font that you will use when you when you finish the page. That is also helpful. But it's just really great because you understand how much space this bubble needs to take up, how much space this text needs to take up, so that you're not putting in a tiny bubble and realizing, oh, this doesn't fit, and now I need to resize this whole panel. So just, you're saving yourself from things like that. And trust me, I have done all this. Plan your bubbles in. Now, would you guys like a video on speech bubbles and what to look out for with speech bubbles, how to make pretty speech bubbles or advice on how to make your speech bubbles better? Would a video like that be interesting? Let me know. I can do that. I've done videos on speech bubbles and text in pages before, but I could make one with some helpful little visuals. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in. My next piece of advice is to keep your outline or your script beside you while you work. I need to do this more, but the thing is, when you are drawing, especially when you're at the later steps of your drawing, if you're doing like your pencils and your inks and stuff or your coloring, it's easy to forget something that you planned in. And I think it's just like you get so locked into what you're working on that you maybe forget like a neat little detail that you wanted to include from your script. So I would make sure that you have your script open either in like a window on your computer or print it out and stick it beside you on your desk, but just have it somewhere where you can refer back to it. It's also helpful for seeing your dialogue, like maybe, if you're following these tips, you have put your speech bubbles with text in, so you have your dialogue on the page, but maybe you need to like hide those while you work on your artwork. So it is good to just have your script there too. I find that really helpful, so keep your script out beside you. My last piece of little advice to make things way easier when you are planning out your pages is to plan your pages out as they'll appear in your book. The thing is, like, when I make comics, I tend to plan them as if I'm going to print them in a book, and then we'll turn them into, like, vertical scrolling webtoon format. But if that's all you have planned, you're like, I'm not going to print these in a book, I just want them digital in webtoon format, plan them out that way. It's really important to, and I'll go back to the book example. For example, with the book, sometimes if I plan out pages and I just look at them one by one, sometimes I'll have like the exact same panel placement on two pages that are side by side. So they look like the exact same panel layout. Sometimes I'll have like a close-up of a face that's at the exact same angle like on two pages, and if you look at it in a book and you see these two pages side by side, it just looks weird. So whenever I'm planning, I always make sure that I have my pages in like a facing spread where I can see what pages will be side by side, and I make sure that those layouts are different enough that they're still interesting and work well together as printed. And the same advice can go if you're doing like a scrolling comic, like a webtoon format. You can also make sure that you're not putting the exact same panel on top of each other, that kind of thing. You really don't want your panels to look exactly the same over and over again. You want to vary things up, and planning it from the start really, really helps make it easy. So there's my advice. There's some quick little things you can do to plan your comics easier. I hope this was helpful. Do you have any questions? Please let me know. I am looking for things to talk about. I have a couple of videos planned where I want to talk about like panel layouts, and that includes like panel shapes, panel size, and like composition. And I want to do one for specifically like if you plan to print your comic, so like that traditional graphic novel manga comic page, and one if you want to do like a webtoon format, like the vertical scrolling kind of comic format. So that's what I have planned, but please let me know if you'd like other videos or if you have specific questions about any of that stuff. I'd love to answer those for you guys. And that's it for today. I'm still working on 9-point pencils. I'm actually a little behind. Oh, the bird's yelling. It's her time to yell. But I'm a little behind on my 9-point stuff. This weekend was a bit of a bust. I got busy doing chores, and Bones and I kind of got lost in playing Octopath Traveler 2 a little bit. Listen, it was the weekend. But yeah, I gotta catch up on my 9-point work. What are you guys up to? We're accountability buddies here. Tell me what you are working on. Are you sketching? Are you writing? Are you finishing pages? Are you planning a new project? Tell me what you're up to. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Goodbye. Mwah.